Good afternoon. Welcome back to Football League World TV. It's time for another fan debate, and here we're assessing Bournemouth's transfer window so far. January window got just under 2 weeks to go, and we're talking all things Cherries. I'm your host, George Daggers, and joining me is Bournemouth fan Neil Grover. Neil, how are you?
Really good, thank you, George. Thank you for having me. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thank you, mate. Good to have you back as well. I had you on earlier on in the season. Going well so far, Bournemouth in the Championship. We're talking all things transfer window, though, for the next 20 or so minutes. Bournemouth fans, do get in touch with across YouTube, Twitter and Facebook. We are live, as I mentioned, for the next 20 or so minutes. Let us know what you made of the window so far. What else would you like to see happen at your club in the coming weeks of the market? Let's get going. Neil, let's talk in a general sense first of all. What have you made of the window so far at your club?
Yeah, I think so far so good. I think as we'll go into, I think we've recruited pretty well. I think like realistically as well. I think there's always a temptation, perhaps, with clubs in our position to go a little bit harder than you should. We haven't done that, so that was my first thing, and so far, as we're recording this, no one or going out live, we haven't lost anyone that really concerns me yet. So I think all so far so good, I think, is the summary.
Yeah, it's shown probably a decent level of restraint. Would you say Bournemouth? They've not, there's not been a sense really this season, or in the first half of the season, that Bournemouth have massively needed to add, and so they've just made a couple of perhaps clever tweaks.
Yeah, exactly that. I think there's improvements to be made for sure. There always is, but I don't think, unlike some teams perhaps around us, there isn't really like a really massive gaping hole in our team. So, yeah, I think it's been really smart so far, and hopefully that will continue.
Okay, let's talk a couple of the signings that have come in. Let's talk James Hill first of all, a really promising player. I think it's fair to say, definitely caught the eye when the deal came over the line. What have you made of the signing, Neil? And how pleasing was it to sort of gauge the reaction as well? Because it seemed like not just Bournemouth fans were impressed with it, but quite a number of neutrals were too.
Yeah, I think any fan, any football fan in England loves to see their club buying young English, like homegrown talent. I think it's something that we've always done fairly well at Bournemouth. And I think it's a fairly cheap deal, like relatively speaking, for a football transfer. I believe it's sort of in the £1 million mark, something like that. But I think he's going to be a really good long-term signing, but also one that can add a bit of strength in depth at the moment. While centre-back isn't necessarily somewhere I would have said there's a need, I think it's always prudent to pick up if you find someone like that is available, and that could make the move, maybe not this year, but maybe next year, particularly if we're unsuccessful in the season. I think it's always good to know, right, who's going to step into the holes that are likely to happen if we don't go up. What's our team going to look like? And I think Hill would be, a starter next year if we don't go up. But I also think he'll do well for the rest of the season as well. So I'm very pleased with him, although we haven't seen him yet as in a Bournemouth shirt.
From what you perhaps saw of him at Fleetwood, or from what you could gather from Fleetwood fans, what are you sort of expecting once he does break into that Bournemouth team? Perhaps not this year or instantly, but once he does, what attributes are you expecting to see from him?
So what I've been told, and I'd be the first to admit he wasn't a player that was on my radar until more or less like the day before he signed. But he, from what I've heard and what I've read about him, he's sort of, I guess, a bit more of an old school centre back, in that he's a larger sort of player. I think I saw one Fleetwood fan said he had he'd worn more bandages than goals scored or something, some ridiculous thing like that. So I think he's a natural player to come in and perhaps learn from Cahill. Arguably, one of the most experienced centre-backs available that we got earlier in the season. He's literally won everything that you couldn't put in front of him. So allowing Hill to spend 6 months, maybe 18 months, if all goes well, learning from Cahill, I I think it's a really natural fit, and hopefully he can learn. If he can become half the player that Cahill was in his prime, I think we've got a bargain.
It does seem quite shrewd, doesn't it? Because it's quite amazing that he only turned 20 sort of last week, James Hill.
Yeah.
And like you say, given we don't know what's going to happen with Bournemouth this season, they could go up, they might not, and what repercussions that might have on members of the squad. But like you say, Gary Cahill, he's not going to go on forever. Eventually, he will hang his boots up. Lloyd Kelly, who we're going to get onto in a bit, there's always going to be speculation written around him, and obviously Steve Cook, another player we're going to get to later on, but he's left. So it's definitely, there wasn't a burning need for a new centre half, but it's quite a clever signing, isn't it, when you really think about it?
Yeah, exactly that. And I'm a big fan of, and we've done it before as well, where we've signed players that are available because they were available, not because we needed them necessarily. But we've seen Solanke actually was one of them by all accounts, that he became available in the January that we signed him for cheaper than we thought we would be able to get him for in the summer. So we made a move for him. Okay, at the time, there was a lot of sort of lambasting around that signing, but I think long term, Solanke is showing his sort of pedigree there. So that's the sort of perhaps signing I'd like us to continue making going forward, particularly when they're English or British players.
Okay, one other player that's arrived is Ethan Laird, coming on loan from Manchester United. What's your initial thoughts about that one as well, Neil?
Yeah, so fullback in general would have been perhaps one area where I would have said perhaps that would be an obvious area to improve. Again, not a gaping hole necessarily, with Stacey and Zamora doing fairly well. But I think beyond those two, it's quite clear with Adam Smith now probably out for the foreseeable at least. We're probably one fullback short of where we needed to be. From what I remember of watching him against us when he played for Swansea, he did really well going forward in particular. I think stats wise, he's had sort of the most touches in the opponent's box for a defender. Certainly for a defender of his sort of skill set. I think one of the Cardiff lads had more, but it was all headers, one from like corners and things. So I think that's exactly what we need. I think that really suits our gameplay. We're a very under Parker, we're a very sort of wing-based team. If you watch us, everything comes down the two wings. So having a player that's not afraid to contribute to that, but hopefully also is will be relatively secure defensively. I think it's a no-brainer. And there's also rumoured that the loan may continue into next year as well, particularly if we go up. So it seems like a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, like you mentioned, he's quite a progressive player, isn't he, Ethan Laird? And I think as well, it kind of shows what Manchester United have planned for him. That he was obviously on loan at Swansea at the start of this season, but they're not in Bournemouth's position, put it that way. That they may pick up in the second half of the year, but Bournemouth are very much challenging for promotion, and like you say, could be in the Premier League next year. It seems like the right move for him at the right time.
It does, and I think what it also as a fan pleased me is it shows. I think it shows a lot of faith from these sort of clubs like your Manchester Uniteds, and we've got City players on loan and the like, and I think it shows a lot of faith in Parker. Maybe he's got a few more connections than historically we've had. I would certainly suspect he does from his career. But there's obviously the fact that he's able to prize that sort of player away from Swansea, and he's a player was playing every week more or less, right? And he's coming into a Bournemouth squad where I suspect he will start, but it won't be a guarantee by any sense of the imagination. So the fact that he's been able to convince Man United that this is a better home for him, money aside, I think is really tantamount to what Parker and what the sort of squad is being built at Bournemouth at the moment.
Okay. On the flip side, one player that has left is Steve Cook, gone on a free transfer to Nottingham Forest. A massive servant for Bournemouth over the years, but wasn't playing too much this season. What did you make of that one?
So it's always sad to see a player like that go. He just about hit his 10-year anniversary for the club. I think the day before he left, I think they held on just so that he could hit that milestone. So he's been an absolute wonderful servant for the club. Even this season, you're right, he hasn't played very much, but I would point to the Fulham game where he literally put his face on the line for the squad. And it's a sad day as well, because he was the last of sort of our real like that Eddie Howe squad that went up and stayed up, and he was a real intrinsic part of that centre line, of that defensive line. But I do think and Bournemouth has always been very much this sort of club that if a player like that is stagnating, because he's only 30, they won't necessarily stand in his way, and I think that was the right move. As much as it saddens me, I don't think, and I understand why Parker. He's the old captain. He was Eddie Howe's captain for a lot of it, and it makes sense when a new manager comes in that he may want to change that. And I think that was perhaps why Cook wasn't playing, rather than lack of quality. But yeah, I mean, it's a shame, but I do think the other side of it, he was rumoured to be the highest earner of the squad, and in the Championship, you can't have your highest earner not playing every week. I think, doing a bit of maths from what I'd seen he was on, the remainder of sort of his contract for the year pretty much would have cost us the same as Hill to buy. So if you weigh it up like that, as Steve Cook for 6 months or Hill for the 3 or 4 years we've got him, it's unfortunately it's a numbers game, right?
Yeah, financially, bit of a no-brainer there, and it does as well, Neil. As you kind of hinted, it does sort of continue that changing of the guard under Parker, doesn't it? Now, like there's as you mentioned, very few players left now from that Eddie Howe era. It's just Parker really starting to, or continuing to, put his stamp on that team.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I think that's that is one of the real things around this. I think Parker wanted to come in, and I, as much as I said, it's sad, for the past. It's I think it was what we needed. I think it's what we lacked last year, was a real step away from Eddie Howe, which the club needed to do. As much as Eddie Howe deserves a statue outside the ground, the club in the short term needed to move away from him, and we just didn't. Certainly for the first 6 to 8 months with Tyndall. So I think that it's the natural continuation for that. And I think the nice side for us is that the club has confirmed he'll be coming back in the summer for a testimonial. So, and has sort of promised to bring back a lot of the players that we didn't get to say goodbye to because of the pandemic. So it's sort of, there will be a nice bittersweet moment in the summer for Bournemouth fans where I hope him and maybe Francis and Daniels and some of these players that were in that squad that sort of snuck out the back door, we'll get to give them a proper send off. So I'm sure there won't be a dry eye in the house when that happens.
Certainly would be massively deserved as well. Let's talk a couple of players, Neil, now that are currently at Bournemouth but have been linked away, and I guess it's to be expected with the talent and performances that they've put in this season. Let's start with Dom Solanke, obviously having a great year for Bournemouth. Linked with Newcastle earlier on in the window. They've since signed Chris Wood to aid their attacking options, so potentially that one's not going to happen. But in the last couple of weeks, are you particularly worried that another club could come in, or I mean, Bournemouth are in a decent position where A, they're not strapped for cash really, and B, they can sell to Solanke. Look, stay with us at least for the rest of this season. We've got a great chance of getting back in the Premier League ourselves.
Exactly that. I think that the key for me is now. I think the Dominic Solanke to Newcastle links were quite lazy. It's the obvious thing. Eddie Howe's now gone to the richest club in the world, and people assumed he would go fishing, wherever he once sat. I think if we were in a different scenario, if we were maybe 8th or something like that, sure, I think there would be a discussion. But the club at this point would want, 40, 50 million pound plus to even answer the phone. And I know that sounds ridiculous for a Championship striker, but you have to consider what we would have to pay to buy in. I mean, you'd have to go after like Diaz of Blackburn, right? That would be the only way you could replace those sort of goals. And he wouldn't cost us much less than that, right? So, and you've got the fact that we would be gambling on our Premier League promotion, and that's it's well advertised that that's 100 million plus nowadays. So I just don't think it would be realistic for him to go. I also don't think that, like, if you think of the clubs that would likely want his services and could potentially afford it, so like your Newcastles, maybe an Everton or someone like that, that they're in the bottom half of the table, and as a player, you could stay put and hopefully more likely than not go up, or you could go and sit in a relegation battle. And then be in exactly the same situation next year, probably albeit on a bit more money. So I think players would weigh that up as well. I think, and I hope, should we go up, we would be better than some of the teams that are down there, because I think every now and then one of those teams needs to come down and kind of refresh, which we've now done. So yeah, I don't think it would be likely. I'm certainly not worried, unless someone comes in with just an astronomical figure.
I guess that's kind of a similar situation with Lloyd Kelly, isn't it?
Yeah.
Talk Sports, Alex Crook, he said earlier on in the window that Bournemouth aren't going to entertain any offers unless they're absolutely mammoth. And again, as it currently stands, you probably can't see anyone coming in with like a massive offer. Some teams are obviously going to be interested in him, but it's probably quite hard to see him going this month at least.
Yeah, exactly that. I'm sure that there will have been a phone call from a Newcastle or someone like that to just say how much, and then I suspect that was very quickly knocked on the head. I just don't see a player, a team, being realistic as well. It's not like you're buying a proven asset in either of those players for the Premier League. They've played there, but they've never. Dom Solanke isn't a 30-goal, 20-goal striker in the Premier League. Could he be? 100%, but is he? No. A team in January is not going to spend 40, 50, even 30 million on a player like that. Not realistically.
Okay. We will see what happens potentially in the summer. Obviously, you'll be hoping Bournemouth are in the Premier League,
and
that'll keep.
It'll be a very different discussion in the summer should we not go up, I think.
We'll see what happens there. Finally, Neil, let's just talk then. Looking ahead to the rest of the window, as we mentioned earlier on, there's just under 2 weeks to go before the deadline. Are there any other areas you'd perhaps like to see Bournemouth looking at, or are you quite content with the way the squad is right now?
Yeah, I think if the window ended in a minute's time, I don't think I would be disappointed. However, I think that there are still one or two gaps that I think, and are rumoured that we're looking to address. I think we could use one more forward to kind of act as a backup / another option. I think it was very clear at the Luton game we were lacking a little bit of thrust, certainly in the first half, without Billing. I also wouldn't mind another, and it could be the same player that does both of these roles, a forward option as well, because I think we're very reliant on Solanke at the moment. And while I think Lowe could step into that role, would I want him to? I don't think. I've always thought of Lowe as more of a winger as opposed to a striker. So yeah, I think I would like another, either a sort of a natural striker or a number 9, something like that, to come in. I know we've been rumoured. We were rumoured at the start that we were looking at Moore in Cardiff and players like that. I think that price might be a bit expensive, but again, going back to what I said earlier around, I think it would be prudent for the club to have one eye on, okay, what happens if we fall to 3rd or 4th? And then what happens if we don't go up like last year? You're going to lose Solanke, you're going to lose Lloyd Kelly, you're probably going to lose Jefferson Lerma and Phil Billing as well, at a minimum. So having someone like Moore that might cost you, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 million, would someone like that be a good replacement next year as a starting option / a plan B for now? I think that would be a good option. You'd recoup that money if we don't go up, because Solanke, you'd still sell him for 20, 22 million, something like that. And you'd still be in the profit. But so that would be the sort of thing I would look at. I know that there has been rumours as well that we might be looking at another keeper. Certainly, we got very close to signing Freddie Woodman in the summer, and I believe that only really fell apart because Newcastle had sort of a mixture of COVID and an injury to Dubravka. Eddie may look to reignite that. But I would, again, I'm not worried. I think Mark Travers is more than good enough at this level.
Okay, we will see what happens in the next week or so before the deadline at the end of the month. Neil, just before we go, give yourself a quick plug. Where can Bournemouth fans find your thoughts on all things Cherries?
Yeah, so I can be found on Twitter at AFCBNG, posting about all sorts of sport and mostly Bournemouth, as well as Fantasy Premier League.
Okay, great stuff. Neil, it's been great to chat to you once again on Football League or TV. We'll try and get you back before the end of the season. Hopefully the Cherries are still firmly in that promotion picture.
Let's hope so, and thank you again for having me.
Not a problem. Coming up on Football League World TV, at 2:30, we've got the debate. How did John Coleman's Accrington Stanley continue to defy the odds? Once again, they're going well in League One. Billy Mully hosting that one. He's joined by Marcus Alley. Then at 4:00 is the EFL Transfer Zone. Sam Rourke hosting that one as per usual. He's joined by Toby Wilding and Ben Wignall. But for myself and Neil, it's bye for now.